Okay.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Ryan Aithan. I'm the executive producer at Gear 7. Very excited to introduce Kirby, bring him into the fold.
Hey.
If this is your first Directors of Donuts, basically this will be a conversation between us, kind of unpacking some recent projects, talking about Kirby's intro into the industry, background. This is hosted by Gear 7 production company and Shift Dynamics. What you can see behind us here. Shift Dynamics is a division, our automotive division that supports automotive projects in this region, but also for Gear 7 specifically. So with that, I'm going to play Kirby's reel here.
That's weird.
All right. As you can see, Kirby's a very talented cinematographer. We've had the pleasure of working with him a few times this last year, both in the DP and director roles. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your intro into the industry and a little bit of your background?
Yeah. My intro in the industry is very accidental, and this industry is kind of interesting. Everyone comes from different places. I was in a hardcore band, and we ran out of money. And then I traveled until I ran out of more money. And I moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and I was living with 9 dudes in like a townhome, which is probably illegal. And a guy 2 doors down from us was a camera operator on like a cooking show. And we're probably shooting the breeze or something one evening, and he's like, hey, if you want to come work with us, it's like $100 a day. You just got to get coffee and sweep the floors. And I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds great. So I started as a PA on like an internet cooking show. And then the writer's strike happened in like, 2008? And I think the recession, kind of all that happened at the same time. So that show went away, and then it was just like, oh my gosh, got to start hustling. And so then I started branching out. And at that point, I had been a PA for about a year or two, and I'd started moving towards, I think had seen a commercial where there was a cinematographer, and he was directing people and lighting and using the camera, and I was like, what's that? I think that's what I want to do. So I was kind of decided that I wanted to take a different approach. I never knew you could do this as a job. I grew up in a very small town in southern Alabama. I had happened on a couple sets throughout my life, but I didn't know you could do this as a job. And so I decided that I wanted to take the time to learn the whole thing, the whole business. So I spent about a decade in grip and lighting, and I worked my way from the swing, grip, dolly grip, best boy, key grip, and then around 8 years ago, so 2017, I was basically just jamming. You work features, docs, commercials, just doing everything. And then I got an opportunity to start DPing. A director I knew reached out he was like, asked for my availability. And I was like, oh, here I am. I'm available. Who's the DP? He was like, we were hoping that you would do it if you're down. And I was like, yes, because you don't get too many of those in your career. If someone gives you an opportunity. And I felt comfortable, confident, and I was like, let's go. And I really haven't looked back since then. So here I am.
That's awesome. And did you know pretty quickly that you wanted to make a career out of working in film production, or was that kind of like were you just trying it on, and
Yeah,
exploring other things?
I think at first I just was like, oh, this is like a fun job that I could wear jeans in and kind of make my own hours. And then I started realizing that all the terrible jobs and things I had done in my life, like just hard work jobs where, you're just grind to the bone, also being in bands and music and touring, like all these things started clicking into place. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I'm really good at this. And I can remember my mom, she was like, I told her that I started doing this job, and she was like, you should take the LSAT. And I was like, well, I don't want to be a lawyer. And she's like, you should just take it. And I was like, okay. So I didn't study. I got really drunk the night before and just went in and like did it in probably 30 minutes. Failed it completely, and I was like, I promise you, I think I'm really good at this job. And it was kind of interesting to watch the first 2 or 3 years of me kind of navigating and understanding it. And, your family being like, oh, you're kind of different, but that's good. You embrace yourself. And then going from that to now accepting it, bragging about it, it's kind of an interesting thing to watch that turn, because I'm like, I remember when you tried to pay me to get out of this career.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we've had the pleasure of working with Kirby on a few projects this last year, and want to kind of go through those together and use them as a bit of a case study to kind of unpack how we work together and kind of the different considerations. We recently worked on a project for Rough Country. For those who may not be familiar, Rough Country is a suspension, automotive parts type brand, very aligned with like tricked out trucks that have lifts and all that sort of thing. I'm pretty sure we have a good bit of Rough Country things on our kits here. So for my end, producer wise, when this came through, this is not a typical commercial project in the way of like, we have 6 shots to comprise a 30-second piece. We're going to storyboard and shoot only those frames. This was really they wanted a high output of content for the project. A lot of different outputs from that commercial, promotional pieces, even some catalog capture for things that they'll use down the road. Also, the call for this project came in, I want to say about 2 or 3 weeks before we started to see leaves falling off trees. And they really wanted it to be a beautiful fall foliage. So I think I called you maybe a week and a half before we had to shoot.
Yeah, I think it was like a week and a half, and
Yeah.
it was just like, here's this job. I was like, cool, I'm available. And
Yeah.
then I was like, who's the director? And they're like, oh, we were hoping that you would do it. And I was like, well, it's not necessarily what I want to do. I actually really like being a DP, but the timeline and kind of also the concept was like, oh, it's kind of more of a montage of photography. So I was like, oh, I guess that kind of tracks within that place. And you get it, you've been around long enough, you see different kinds of people, you're like, oh, I think I can land that. So
Yeah, and I think for automotive jobs sometimes too, a lot of the directing is really logistical cinematography coordinating. I mean, it's a lot more how the frames are set up, how they're going to transition from shot to shot. We're not directing as much talent in the way of like a lifestyle or dialogue delivery.
yeah, it's more like a vibe.
Yeah. So so it was a fun project. Ended up shooting over 2 days, just north of Nashville. And do you want to kind of walk us through? I'll show the piece after we kind of go through all the details of it.
Sure.
Do you want to walk us through kind of like how you went into that approach for being efficient, getting maximum output? I think we brought up multiple camera bodies and kind of had different setups.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges was we wanted to have multiple kinds of looks, which required the truck with the arm and also the side-by-side, which would have a hard mount and a black arm on it. And so it was like, okay, well, we want to do lifestyle, which is people enjoying the spoils of having this stuff on your truck, so outside of the truck, but we also want to get shots of the truck itself or different vehicles moving about. So I had proposed using 2 cameras, one camera that would basically live on a gimbal. So you just kind of have that one where you can just kind of interchange it to your different mounts. And then we would have another camera which you could hard mount to a car, because I love hard mounting. I think they're dynamic and interesting. And then we can also use that. We can pull it off and go handheld. So we can go handheld in the car. We can go handheld with people. And it kind of just gives you, it's all about trying to make your days, but also not bog client down. This client also, they were easy to work with, but they did tell us, they're like, hey, so on the second day, we don't want to be here for a long time. Like, you are used to 10 or 12-hour days. We would like to be gone in like 8 hours. So that was another kind of challenge of like, how do you get this breadth of footage with a kind of a hard timeline as well. And it's like, well, we need to have sunsets and this and this. And so it's about maximizing. I think we were flying a drone at the same time we're shooting like on the deck. So it's just putting a bunch of stuff together.
Yeah, it's unique input from a client, because usually it's like, hey, we're going right to the buzzer.
Yeah, they were like,
and we don't want to pay for overtime, but we have to.
We
go
want to
along.
be home.
Yeah.
We want to be home for dinner. And I was like, so do I. Yeah. I would love that.
Yeah.
But also, like, we should get some.
As long as we get sunset.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I know from our team, because we've worked with a lot of different DPs and teams for automotive work. I think one thing that really stood out from even Patrick, our precision driver, was your experience in hard mounts. How do you mind explaining kind of like your background in that? Because I know as a producer, when I hear hard mount, I'm thinking that's 2 hours of the day, like gone. To set up any shot like that is always just that consideration of time.
Yeah, I think because of my background, specifically in the grip side of G&E, I'll backstep just a fuzz. One of the things when I started working in this business, and I was like, I want to be a DP, but I want to like learn, kind of like want to work my way, apprentice my way up. A reason I stuck with gripping was because it's camera support, it's lighting control, and it's safety. And I felt like as a DP, those are all really good things to know. You can let a gaffer, an electrician, figure out how much voltage you need, but you're going to control and manipulate light, so you're going to know how much that light does. So that was one thing, and then also like just learning the time it takes to make things. Like hard mounts, you're taking speed rail, or you can even use wood, you can use different items, but you're making the camera as rigid as the car. So that requires really just time and gear. Because you've got to make it secure, you got to make sure it doesn't fall off. And I had worked on movies, big movies, tiny movies, commercials, music videos, and you just build it over and over again. And you're like, oh, it's probably going to take this much time. So it was like, oh, we're going to need probably, if we basically, for this job, and I always kind of like this, like, okay, we've got a car day, and in the middle of the car day, what we're going to do is we're going to hopscotch hard mounts. So we'll just make sure that we have a team. Because a lot of times if you have a G&E team, when we didn't have a big one, you want to bring them with you on set. Like, oh, I'm going to need my people. And for me, because of my background, I was like, I don't need them. Let's just work. We can just embrace the natural environment. We'll just do whatever we can. They need to be working on the car stuff, because that'll make it even better. Because the more time they have to shore something up, just makes it, if you have a good idea at least, makes it more dynamic. And you're like, oh, what if we go a little further out? And they're like, oh yeah, we can do that. So,
yeah. Well, I know hard mount shots are important on shots with like products too, because that's ultimately you're showcasing the specific products in situations. So like seeing them ripping through leaves and mud, and seeing suspension crunch and all those things becomes so vital.
Well, it becomes like, it's all about like this, like you feel it, it's visceral. Like there's something like, the camera and the thing are moving together at the same place instead of like crossing paths, ships in the night or whatever. They're literally moving. And so any of the energy and action, like it just becomes, at least for me and my perspective, like when you put the camera hard mounted on a vehicle or hard mounted on anything and they're both tracking at the same kind of speed, there's just a lot of energy there that I feel like in this spot was all about like energy, movement. And so trying to make sure the camera was always moving, not a lot of stillness to this one. It's just about like you're going somewhere.
Yeah, which was a fun challenge because we also had a lot to shoot.
Yeah,
just a lot of output. And I'll go ahead and show the piece here. This is one of a few different edits. This is still the first version, not colored, sound, all the things. But this will give you a sense of one of the outputs that we are going to walk away with, in addition to a whole catalog of footage that they'll be able to use down the road as well.
Whether camping with family, riding trails with friends, or blazing dirt roads solo. Be ready for the journey, no matter where it leads. Adventure starts here, Rough Country.
Yeah, and that's probably what, a third of all the shots we got.
Oh, yeah.
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 A lot of output for 2 days. So we'll do Q&A at the end of everything. So if anyone has any questions on this piece or any of the other ones, if you can hold them to the end, we'll definitely allocate some time for that once we go through these. And kind of switching gears a little bit too, this is something we've been asking in recent Directors of Donuts. Just kind of, I know it's a hot topic for everyone. Can everyone see it? Just AI and kind of how that's currently being used by some of our creatives. I know as a production company, we're using it mostly for pre-visualizations, animatics, helping speed up some of the processes, stripping background noise in post, but really always keeping the emphasis on working with creatives and people who are, using their craft to create art. Never want to replace that with AI, obviously. So I'm curious to get your take on kind of how you've seen that interaction and how you've been utilizing.
I do feel, obviously everybody's talking about it all the time, which always is tiring, because you're just like, oh my gosh. I think Ben Affleck, I don't know if you guys saw this, Ben Affleck, what he had said, I think is really, really insightful and kind of how I feel about it. It's this idea of like AI can, what is it? It's like a craftsman knows how to start, but an artist knows when to stop. And I think that that's such a succinct way of saying AI is a great tool, but like any other tool we have in our toolkit, it will never replace a person. It's just another kind of piece of gear. And it kind of, I remember watching this video about how passwords are secured, and there's a series of lava lamps, and it's basically a series of video cameras watch the lava lamps, and it creates a password based on that. Because computers in their state, they cannot be chaotic. It is always ordered and controlled. And so I think that for me, as an artist, and it even feels weird when I say that. It's like, oh, you're an artist. I think that I look at what I do and what I try to bring to the table is a sense of humanity, a sense of reality, a sense of texture and personality. I bring my life experiences, everything that I've seen and failed at and succeeded at and want to experiment. I bring that to each set and to each idea. And I think within that idea is, I love a happy accident on set. Like if you ever shot on film or if you've ever just been doing something and you happen to turn around and you're like, oh my gosh, look at that butterfly, it's beautiful. Or, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. I don't shoot butterflies on every set. But there is this idea of happy accidents, like something you stumble upon when you're creating, when you're storytelling. And AI cannot make a happy accident. It will never give you like some crazy lens flare unless you program it, but it's not the same. It's not the same as experiencing it. So for me, I look at it and I'm like, maybe it means that I'm not as good as I should be, but I look at it and I'm like, oh, well, if a happy accident is there, like to me, it feels real. There's something emotive about that quality. So I look at AI almost as, there's 2D, there's 2D animation, there's 3D animation, and there's live action. And I kind of look at it that it might just sit in between live action and like something like Pixar. There's still a way to tell a story, still a way to do things. I think every time a company comes out with an ad, which Coca-Cola just did, our responses are, this is soulless, you monsters. And I would agree to that right now. I feel like there's too much kind of dipping their toes too deep. But the real thing about watching someone connect, whether you're making a commercial, whether they're telling a feature, like if it's humans telling human stories, like that's important. But for instance, like the first 8 minutes of Up, I will weep every time. And it doesn't bother me that they're not real people on screen, but it's a good storytelling. And I think that there's still a human quality to that. So I think it's not going to go away, but for me, I'm not really concerned that it's going to replace me, maybe because I'm not that good, and so that gives me happy accidents to like make. But that's kind of like how I feel about the whole deal.
Yeah, well, and that maybe helps transition into the wabi sabi. I personally hadn't heard of this. I thought you were maybe describing a restaurant to me when we were talking about
Wabi
it
sabi.
originally.
Yeah, it's a great place.
But a bit of a philosophy that I know you kind of live by, but also informs you how you work and interact with work.
Yeah, yeah. It's more of this idea of, and really, I think I first encountered it when I watched Black Swan. But this idea of like imperfection is perfection. Like the more we tweak, the more we try to control, the less we're in control, which is kind of counterintuitive. But that releasing that and kind of like embracing a certain sense of chaos, obviously within safety standards, but like embracing the natural kind of thing, there is something really freeing in that. And I know as a DP or someone in the film world, we are all about control. And I would even tell you that I think what makes something cinematic is thoughtfulness and control. Like you're controlling the environment. But there is a certain time where you do have to let go. And I think that's kind of this idea of this philosophy is perfection is found in imperfection and kind of embracing. And so like when I'm on set, if someone set a light, and a lot of these things that I'm also saying are from better masters, bigger masters, you know, like masters of cinema that do this, and I read it and I'm like, oh, I'm going to take that and like put that in my pocket. But I think David Mullen was working on a show and he saw a gaffer place a light and then just kind of hit the light and made the light kind of wiggle and not be perfect. And I think that's something really interesting about when we're on set, we're like, oh, this is perfect. Oh, it's perfect. It's perfect. I need to do this. I need to shape this. Tweak, 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 tweak. And for me, I kind of like embracing the idea of like light spaces, not faces, like kind of find your way around it and try to find something that like feels real. So that's within that idea of wabi sabi is embracing the just kind of the thing and not necessarily don't tweak yourself to death. Like just kind of like let it be and just think about it instead of always trying to like go for it.
And what is the origin of wabi sabi? Like where does that come
It's a Japanese philosophy. I think that I read a book about it, and it's interesting. They're like, yeah, like everyone in Japanese culture knows about it, but they can't tell you about it, but they know it, they feel it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is really awesome. I just want to learn more about it. And I think like it kind of has helped me as like a parent, as a husband, as a person, all the roles that I occupy in life, and just kind of embracing. And that idea of like the more you kind of try to control something, the less it feels in control. And so if you just kind of step back and just kind of be and kind of roll with the punches, I don't know, like there's a peacefulness to it because you're just like, I don't know, just see what happens. Like, and you know, like I think that, I don't know, it's really freeing because I think that there was a point in my time professionally and personally, you just try to control everything. And, you know, life is not an algorithm. There isn't some sort of magic way that we can do it. And I think like letting it go has made me a better person on my personal side, and also I think a better craftsman on this side as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's great. And working into some of these other upcoming projects here, this is a piece that you worked on a couple years ago, is that right?
Yeah.
Do you want to set up this in terms of kind of what you worked on, challenges you overcame,
Sure.
and everything? I know we have some plots here to look
Yeah.
at.
You can throw the plots up if they're there. So basically, I got tasked with shooting Charlie Puth, an artist. I didn't know who he was until I had to do this. And then I realized, oh, he's actually quite famous. We had a limited amount of time to shoot these product spots and an interview and B-roll for this Bose thing. And so we were in LA, we had one studio space, and so I think my lighting order was 53 lights, because we wanted to be able to move him from set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, also do an interview, and then also do product work. And each set was supposed to be kind of like this minimalist design, so you see off the sides, you can see the lighting, you can see that stuff. It was more expressionistic. So these lighting plots are mainly just me kind of getting everything ready for production design and also gaffer and his team. So we had, because I think we only had 8 hours with Charlie, and that includes lunch. So you have an interview, 4 different scenes, and then also the product work, all within a 7-hour window.
Yeah, and he's probably got to walk.
And
in,
he's got
be ready to go.
he's got to walk in. Everyone's got to say hey. He's got to go through looks. He's got to talk to everybody. So you're probably burning another hour there. So now you're at 6 hours. You're at half a day of getting it done. And once again, and you put an interview in there, that's probably 60 minutes. So we had ordered so many lights, so we basically be walking from one place to the other. So you can just probably go through any of these.
Sure. And multiple cameras, it looks like.
Nope, just one camera.
Okay.
One camera on steady with Zoom. So I controlled the Zoom, and I would just talk with the operator. Because the idea was to have the cameras moving, there's energy, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek and fun. So there's a lot of like tricks that we played here. Like we wanted to do an overhead shot. We didn't have the money nor the headroom at the stage we were at to do it. So I was like, well, what if we just put a mirror up there and shoot it that way? Because, I'm like, I don't know, like that's one way for us to do it as long as we don't see it. They like that idea, and so it's like, I think that's always what we're trying to do is like you're trying to just solve challenges. You're trying to solve like, hey, we want to do this. And I think like, thankfully, because of my particular background, I kind of come at it from a different perspective of like how we can do it in a different way. Not that it's just like, we could try a mirror. I don't know, let's try that, see if it works. And it does, you're like, oh, cool, that actually did work.
Yeah.
So this one was interesting because of our time limit with the artist. The amount of lighting that we had to do because we couldn't move any lights. We had to basically have every setup built. And we only had a day for a pre-light and a program. So,
That's a lot.
yeah, it was a particular challenge. But one of the things I also like to do, which I learned from another DP that I worked for, when you have talent, when you have high-profile talent, get an early call time for you and your crew, and especially your camera. And if you have a steady cam or if you're working with a dolly grip or anything like that, plot out every frame. And then just tape, put all your marks down for what you want, and like your lens, your height, everything. So you basically can go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 without having to, eyeball it or like, oh, is this right? I don't know. Should we boom up a little bit? It's just like, here's a shot 1, here's shot 2, here's shot 3. And you can just move really fast. And it just kind of gets them out because, when you're working with talent, especially like high-profile talent, that kind of thing is they're on a limited schedule. If you can keep them happy, you make them happy, everyone's happy. And everyone hears about how well you treated them, which you should. You should treat them well. And don't waste their time. Don't waste your time either. Like, have a plan, put it in place, and just execute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So from all the strategies you put into place, were there any that didn't work, things that worked really well, like the mirror gag end up working out for all that? Yeah?
Oh, it was great. Yes. I mean, it all worked.
Yeah.
It all worked. That one's just for the pod. Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's only 1 or 2 where I was like, the lighting's okay. But you're also, once again, it kind of goes back to the idea of accepting. You're just like, well, at the end of the day, the client's happy. If I'm not like, oh, it's a Rembrandt, it's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, this thing is very finite.
Sure.
It's my legacy is not a Charlie Puth Bose spot, I hope, in my life.
In this podcast. Okay, we'll go ahead and play it here. Anything else you want to set up for this before we play it through?
Roll the tape.
Oh, here's one more setup.
One day, I thought to myself, why has nobody made a song where the lyrics are talking about going from one side to the other side? Memories follow me left and right. That little melody popped into my head. Wow, when people hear this on these, it's going to be so much better. I do remember being really interested in sounds when I was younger. Then my mom taught me piano when I was 4. There wasn't a particular genre that I was drawn towards. It was more how music made people feel. and then discovering jazz when I was 10 years old and really liking the chord progressions. I love the dissonance. G sharp and A, that little rubby dissonant thing. It makes everything a lot more colorful. While I was in college, I would look at the charts and be like, oh, this song is #1, so I have to make this song that sounds exactly like that. The moment I started to find my sound was when I stopped caring about what other people thought. It's actually the imperfections on this album that make things sound wider.
The noise cancellation works too well. Did you say the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Should we do it?
This new record is my personality with melody and chords and a drum beat attached to it. Sonically, it's reminiscent of music that I grew up listening to. It's a tad more experimental and a little bit more genre blending. I thought I could never integrate jazz music with pop music. At 30, I realized that anything is possible. For me, it took 10 years to find my sound, and I want other people to be inspired to make their own sound.
Take up every corner of my mind. What you gonna do now?
Nice. Awesome.
That's so good.
I'm curious, the moments where he's kind of like bouncing on the couch and just hanging out, was that all planned? Was it just 50-50, kind of like just?
Yeah, it was real 50-50. It was basically like, I think we had the steady op. I was like, hey, just have your rig, your post nearby, or your stand. And just every time you cut and you go on your post, like just told camera, like be ready to roll. Just always point your camera towards where he's at, just in case we get anything bonus.
Yeah.
And that happened a couple times. And like the overhead rig with the light changing, like I was really inspired by Severance at the time. I think this came out like a year and a half ago. And I was like, oh, I want to do something like that, obviously on a budget. So you only have 3 vortexes versus like a whole ceiling. But you're like, oh, let's do this. And it's all, and also trying to, you can make a plot and you can make a plan, but you embrace the B-roll, you embrace that 50-50, and also you listen to your crew. I think that the DMX guy, who's a gaffer as well, was just like, hey, I can do this trick. What do you think about this? And I was like, show me, and letting other people have ownership in you have the big idea, but you kind of like give them that ownership too. You're like, hey, try something. Like I always try to tell people like, hey, just try something. Like here's the idea. I can be very specific, but I would rather let's all kind of do this together.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, I think you can tell too, like you don't get those kinds of shots if the vibes are off. Like if he's stressed and time's not working, like he's not gonna be relaxed.
Yeah, you want to.
Off,
yeah, you want him to
so
be like
cool.
kind of a goofball and like, have fun. Yeah,
that's fun. All right. So we'll probably show these two here pretty quickly, and then we'll go into Q&A if anyone has any questions for us. So the White Elephant Project, do you want to set that one up here?
Just got tasked with making a comedy spot. I don't really think that if someone saw me or saw my work, they'd be like, this guy likes funny stuff. I do. I actually love funny stuff. But there was a comedy spot, and it basically was like, wanted to have this kind of vibe and feeling of like locked off kind of stuff. So we built a storyboard out, and I think we had one day to shoot it, and it was a lot. I think it was like 48 setups. I don't think that we did I don't think you see 48 in the final, but just like having to do that plot and like sticking to a storyboard and like, here's what we want to see. And this one was kind of unique because I was actually asked to draw the storyboard. So I drew like the worst sketches, and then they sent them to a real storyboard artist who translated it, and then we shot it. So that was an interesting, kind of bit.
All right, I'll go ahead and play it here. Oh yeah, these
There's
are
the boards. Check them out.
And before we show it, did everything get shot to the boards? Were there any pivots on the day? I feel like a spot like this is like a traditional commercial approach where you're framing every single
Yeah.
spot.
This was a pretty traditional, yeah, like I think like the only thing that changed was location dictated a few things, which it always will. So I think maybe like the idea was at present, but the angle's a little bit different. But for the most part, we shot pretty straightforward towards the boards.
Nice. Very cool. All right, here we go.
You know you can play online, right?
Thanks.
It's great. And where did you shoot this one?
Virginia, so it was, yeah, Richmond, I think.
Okay, nice, very fun. All right, moving into our last one here. This was a spec project, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, so basically the genesis of this project, I was in Miami on a shoot with a director and a guy who gaffs for me a lot. He was down there, we had a key grip down there, and we were just kind of shooting the breeze and was like, you know what I want to make? I want to make car stuff. At the time, I was like, I didn't have any car work. I was like, I just want to make something like car related. So we kind of came up with this very basic idea, and then at the time I was living in Birmingham, came back and basically was just trying to find a director. We were like, we just need someone to do it. And so approached someone, they said yes, and then called every favor, like every favor I could ever called for. I called for an arm. I had this company come down out of Ohio who brought a Trinity. It was pretty, I would say, so the reality is that we spent $400 on this spec, and that was to rent the car. Everything else was a location that I'd always seen and wanted to see, or a location that I've shot on previously, and then calling in all the favors. So it was just a way to just kind of like get it out of your system and like just try to see if you can make it. It was fun. I mean, it's probably one of the few things that I think like every frame I'm like solid work. I like it. I like how it vibes. It's the stuff that I want to make. It's narrative. It's got feel to it. But here's the thing. I'll say this real quick before we get into it. So I'm in it. My daughter's in it. My dad's in it. Like, it's scrappy, but it was just like, well, we don't have any money, but we still need to make something. My brother was going to be it, and he backed out. So because I look like my dad and my brother, I was like, I guess I'll do it. And it was just wanting to see if we can make it happen and like go for it. The location, I think I had to take some photos for them, just so that they were about to move. And it was incredible production design. Like, it's like 100-year-old brake and tire shop, and it like didn't change a thing. I lit it basically 99% of this is lit practically or naturally, and just embracing it. And when you see a space, you don't always have to change everything about it. See what it does first, turn a light off, start there, and also, your idea, and then kind of go from there. But this one, it was just like, this has a great texture, has a great feeling, it looks good, just let's embrace it.
Yeah. So was it like a barter deal with the location? Kind of like a handoff of images?
Yeah, seriously. Like, I'd driven by this place like probably for 10 years, and I'd peer in the garage, and I was like, oh my God, that looks so cool. It looks so cool in there. And then when this kind of came up, it was like, okay, we went to them, they're like, hey, we're about to move. And I was like, well, I will take some photos for you so you have it, your space for posterity's sake. Mm-hmm. And they were like, yeah, that's great. And it's cool. And then the other place we went to, I had done a short film years before out there and knew that you could basically shoot there for free, and it was an old factory or like a quarry. So you have a quarry, so it's like just dynamic, interesting, and different. And we just went out there and was like, hey, can we shoot? And they're like, yeah, sounds great. Here's when the big rock trucks are moving, but if you're here in between this time and this time, they won't be there. So that was kind of our runway.
That's cool. And can you talk a little bit too, I know for some folks here who are maybe kind of like just starting off in their careers, like the importance of the collaborations that come from spec jobs, but also then the output of that. I know as for Gear 7, like we've done a good bit of spec jobs in the past, and a lot of times those get used to sell the actual paid commercial projects that we want to work on. It's a good way to like show what you're capable of doing, the type of look and feel you want to do, but maybe haven't gotten the boards to execute on specifically. Do you want to talk about a little bit about that process?
Sure. When you make a spec, I mean, for me, it's an excuse. I kind of always tell people when I'm doing something and I'm not charging, it needs to be an investment or an excuse. It needs to be an excuse to work with some people you want to work with, excuse to work on an idea you want to work on, and it's also should potentially be an investment, right? Because I didn't make $1 from the actual thing that it is, but the dividends, the investment that I put in, the time and energy and effort, mentally, physically that I put in has paid, just leaps and bounds over it. So it's way like I still get work from people seeing this. But, I think that any of the car work that I've done is some sort of direct result of this. So I think that if you feel it in your bones and you want to make something, flesh it out, think about it, and just go and do it. And the worst that can happen is that you just got to hang out with your friends, or you got to make something. But that's the worst that can happen. The best that can happen is someone sees it and it just generates it. And I remember when I was a PA, the producer told me this. I tell people this all the time. So if you've heard this before from me, I'm sorry. But she said, like, every one good day on set equals 3 more days of work. And I think that applies to something like this too. Like every one good idea potentially gets you 3 more ideas, 3 more jobs. And so it's just about getting the reps in, pushing yourself. And honestly, I got to make it with my friends. It was a collaboration of like ideas. The story did not get fleshed out until post. It was more like, okay, we've got this really cool 2 sets. We had this general idea. Okay, let's shoot here for a little bit. Okay, cool. Let's shoot here for a little bit. Okay, cool. And then it's like, what's the story? We're like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. So that's not the way you want to go about it, but it's a spec. So, you're just trying to find it.
Sure.
That's it, yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll go ahead and play it here, and then we'll open up for questions if anyone has any.
Do not stand at my grave and weep. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush. of quiet birds in circle flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die.
All right. Anyone have any questions you'd like to ask Mr. Kirby?
That's Dr. Kirby, actually.
Curious how often you find yourself on camera and when you're not on camera, what's your relationship with your partner?
That's great. Yeah. More often than not, I like to operate. I think it is nice to be that close, and you're able to just be, just one step closer. You're able to be in the action with them. I love operating. It is definitely my preferred method. I have worked with operators in the past, and I think for me, the one big thing that I don't give them notes while we're shooting. Wait till the take is over. But you also try to always give them like a general, like, okay, here's the vibe. Here's like what I like. I like these framings, this composition. So I want to try to stay in these places. And it's more about, it's more about like not being like specific, like, okay, take 2 beats and I want you to start doing this. It's like, hey, feel it. Let's see how it feels. Like I might be like, oh, let's boom down a little bit on this shot and maybe, pan to left, but that's before the take. But you just let them go. Probably for several years, I definitely was like, no one touches the camera except for me when I was younger and like wanted more control. And then releasing that control and letting other people, letting great technicians and great craftsmen in their own right own that, and then working with really good ones. Like you start seeing like there's a benefit of adding people to the conversation, especially the good ones. Like you're just like, oh, I love what you did there. That's great. And like championing, you don't always just like talk down to them like, you missed it. You're just like, yo, I really love this. Let's try this on this next one. So always giving them like, it doesn't need to always be negative. Just let it, unless they just botch it. But you can botch it too. It's not like if I mess up, I'm like, I messed that one up, guys. I need another one for camera. Even if the first AC, for instance, buzzes and I'm operating, I'll just say, hey, that's my bad. Let's do it one more time. Because it doesn't do anybody any good to throw someone under the bus that hard in front of everybody. Just work together, talk, sidebar, but just chat and have a good time.
Well, you mentioned on the Bose piece, you were running Zoom. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you like to always kind of have like some level of hands-on level, even if it's like steady opt and?
Not really. I mean, it just depends on the idea too. Like I knew for that piece, I was influenced by Larkin Siepel's work, and he does a lot of Steadicam work with slow zooms, and I kind of just wanted to use a different X and Y. Like I knew that we were going to be doing this, but I like the idea of like slowly moving in. So it just gives it a more dynamic feel. But I also I shot a feature a year ago, and it came out this summer, and it was a union job, and we had to hire operators. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be B-op, it's going to be great. But then I started realizing it's actually better if you have more than one camera, you need to sit back and watch the monitor, and you can see the piece being cut better. And that actually gives you, just because you can doesn't mean you should, And so I think that it gives you permission to release it and like just kind of watch it. And I didn't touch anything. I think maybe I would talk to my DIT about like, hey, let's stop down a little bit here. But I wouldn't even control iris. I was just watching.
That's cool. Any other questions?
Go ahead.
I think anybody that's got skate videos, music videos, or been in a band knows that sort of mentality sticks with you forever.
Yeah.
So what are some of the more punk rock moments in your career where you said, like, screw it, let's just do it? Or like, I don't care what you think, I'm gonna try it, and it really paid off?
That's a good question. Probably a lot of times when I'm just like, hey, just because my title is director of photography, it doesn't mean that I need to do something here. Like, I'm just going to turn a light off, or we're not going to use this, or we're not going to use that. I think a lot of it, for me, it's just like kind of embracing that idea of I don't have to tweak everything. Like, let's just let it be. Let's like kind of let it be more musical and let it be kind of flow, like just let it flow. And I don't have to always do something to justify my rate, if that makes sense. Like, you don't have to, every shot, every scene isn't like, I'm here, it's time for me to do my work, everyone wait for me, like it's my turn. It's like, no, like, let me just be more underneath, and I don't have to announce myself by, the work that I've made everyone do and wait for, or just like letting everyone know that like I'm important. Because, to me, it's more of, I feel like maybe the idea of the punk aesthetic of it is actually like reversal of like showing off. It's like, let me be a little more subdued and work that way. Cool. If that answers your question, does that?
Yeah, it's like the whole punk rock thing, like I don't care what you think.
Right, I don't care what you think. I'm actually not going to do. Yeah, I just care about the work. Let me just care about the work. And I think that, to me, it's about like accepting like, this looks great, or actually like, we don't need to do all this stuff. I also like worked for tons of DPs that did so much, in my opinion, extra work to do something that was already existing in the first place. So for me, the idea of punk rock is, why am I doing this and wasting time and money when I can just turn this light bulb off and this is more interesting? So that's kind of my act of rebellion, is by doing less, if that makes sense.
Nice. Anyone else? For it.
No, so it's not my sister. I don't have a sister that I'm aware of, but she, actually, her name's
You said your daughter and
So my daughter.
yeah.
My daughter and me and my dad, who's in that photo. But Julie actually is a stunt person who was based here, and I think she's in New Orleans now. But we happened upon her because initially we were going to have another actress do it, and she was just going to drive the car. Julie was, and then the director had talked to her and learned some stuff that she wanted to act, and so we put her in front because we thought it, especially from a perspective of stunt driver plus actress, you're like, well, if they can just be the same person, then it makes it a little easier.
Mm-hmm. It's impressive with the
Okay.
I mean, are those real tears on camera?
Yeah, she went for it. She did a great job. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Any questions on Zoom, Justin? Anything we need to incorporate in? Nope. Nice.
Oh, that hurts.
We probably got time for, I'd say, probably just one more. If anyone has any questions, last thoughts.
Horror. Yeah. I did a horror short that comes out in January, but horror is fascinating to me. I think because it's always a good sign of the times. It's a reflection. You can make like really interesting art in a really simple way. And also, like, by and large, like, horror movies can always be lower budgeted, so they're a little bit more easy to access for those of us that don't live in the upper echelons of this business. And they usually have a great ROI. So they're always, something that people can eyeball and be like, hey, if this is a good idea. I call it, and I think this also goes, sorry, that's Connor expounding. This also goes to the idea of like camera systems and camera bodies and you can just like, what lights are you using? All these things. Like, I kind of call it the Blair Witch. I call it the Blair Witch effect. Like, if you have a good story, it does not matter what you use. Now, I own a nice camera, but I'm saying ultimately it doesn't matter what system you use. If you have a good story and you have somewhat compelling actors and direction, cameras, lights are kind of secondary, in my opinion. Though they elevate, but they don't necessarily, like, if all you're doing is doing tricks and all this crazy lighting or whatever, to me, I'm wondering, like, what are you covering up? But when they all work together, you're like, oh, this is incredible. So
Yeah, very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kirby. Thank you to everyone for coming. If anyone would like to see any of the gear here or ask questions, feel free to hang out for a bit. We'll be here hanging out. And big thank you to Lindsay for setting all this up, Ashley as well, and all the interns for all your help with this. Thank you, Kirby. Appreciate it.
thank you. And scene.
And,
And scene.
and cut.
That's a wrap.